Hey guys, Adam Savage here in my cave answering some questions from tested patrons, specifically about my shop infrastructure and working habits. And End of the Trail Outdoors and Arts, tested patron, End of the Trail Outdoors and Arts, all in one word, wants to know, they say, I recently started making cosplay items again after almost 10 years. I never know exactly how I'm going to design something. I just pull out materials and start making. However, you always seem to have a game plan of the exact material you're going to use before you begin. Is this part of your pre-planning, or does this come naturally to you after years of experience working with materials? End of the Trail Outdoors and Arts, it's a great question. It, it is a little of both. It is a little bit that I do a lot of pre-planning in my head before starting a build. That's definitely true. I also have years of experience of all sorts of different materials. And I do a fair bit of pulling everything out and looking at it and figuring out where to go from there. In fact, that's the most common way I work. The commonality between all three of those methodologies is that I do a lot of iterative construction in my head before I begin. If I didn't do that before I begin, sometimes I'm doing it during the tedious parts of a build, but there's certainly plenty of times. Let's see here. There's plenty of times that I'll come in and be like, I'll put some stuff down on the table and I'll be like, and I'll just look at it for a while and think, maybe I don't know, how do I? And frankly, I don't film those moments a lot. And part of it is because if I turn on the camera, it might run for an hour while I'm just staring at the workbench. And that's not what I'm looking for in this kind of storytelling. So I do a lot of that kind of sort of looking at stuff and feeling the weight of it off camera. It's sort of an efficiency for, being able to get stuff in the camera that the editors can utilize. And that, look, within your question is this assumption, I feel like, and it's an assumption about one way maybe being better than the other. You say, I never know exactly how I'm going to design something. I just pull out materials and start making. I argue that I do much of the same thing. Just with experience, I can do some of that iteration in here instead of out here. And that refines my process a little bit. But there's still plenty of builds that kick my ass entirely from a mental standpoint until I actually put the materials in front of me, where I can't parse at all how this build should go until I'm already halfway through it. Or I'm halfway through it and it changes and I realize I need to do a totally separate kind of story. My answer to your question, to your official question, is I do a bunch of pre-planning. I do as much as I feel like I need to so that when I push record on the camera, I'm rolling on something and the audience gets to see something interesting happen. But I also fly by the seat of my frickin' pants a huge amount of the time. And I don't have a value judgment as to one of those. I don't have a value judgment as to one of those methods being better or more productive than the other. And I would exhort you not to either. The real question to ask is, are you happy with the product? If you're happy with the product, but there's parts of the process that you feel could go smoother, well, that's a worthy line of inquiry. I'm just always wary about the comparing mind. Like, is that person's experience better than mine? Are they doing more that I should be doing? All of those shoulds. And look, comparing mind is a real state of mind, and it's one that is very, very culturally prevalent. It's very American, the comparing mind. How are they doing in relation to me? How am I doing in relation to them? And it's a very toxic mindset. I know people that get depressed when they see movies with great screenplays because they write screenplays. and a good one depresses them. I don't understand at all. Not to say that that's a bad way to respond, because it's not. It's just the way that they respond. But we all can only do the thing that's in front of us. Bill Hicks had this great thing that he said years and years ago. Hold on just a second. I'll call this up. What Bill Hicks said was a paraphrase of, the more yourself you are, the less competition you have. And he said this, a friend of mine who's a comedian wrote this to me. He said, I think he said it to inspire comedians to dig deeper, to stand out in a crowded field. Bill Hicks was saying that, don't worry about people stealing your material. If your material is deeply personal, they can't steal it. And I think one of the ways he phrased it is, you are the master interpreter of your experience. No one else can interpret your experience. So if someone steals your joke, they've stolen your joke, but they haven't stolen you. They're still not you telling that joke. That's still something unique you bring to it. Now, I am not a comedian, so I don't mean to express that I have some stance on joke stealing or how one should feel about it, because I do not at all. Being a comedian is one of the hardest arts I think there is. I think of comedy and magic as the two art forms in which there are actual stakes. Yeah. And I think comedy is hard enough that comedy is hard enough that it is the reason that comedians make such amazing actors so crazy frequently. But I drift away. Just be careful about the comparing mind. That's all I really want to say. End of the trail, outdoors and arts. Just be careful of the comparing mind. Your experience is the only one you have access to. This is something I need to tell myself just as much as I need to tell you. Thank you guys so much for these awesome questions. I just love this forum. Tested patrons, your questions remain awesome. If you'd like to become a tested patron, info is in the comments below. Stay safe, you guys, and I will see you next time.